At dawn in the Kerch Strait, steel failed, oil bled into the sea, and a hidden fleet exposed its cost. In December 2024, two aging Russian tankers broke apart, releasing thousands of tons of heavy fuel oil into the Black Sea. At first light on the 15th of December 2024, the Kerch Strait was restless. Wind pressed against steel hulls. Short, steep waves slapped the surface with a dull, repetitive force. In that narrow passage between mainland Russia and annexed Crimea, two oil tankers were already in trouble. Volganev 212 and Volganev 239 had entered conditions they were never meant to face, and the sea began to decide the outcome. Volganev 212 was the first to fail. The vessel fractured under stress, its structure giving way with a final, irreversible crack. The bow tore loose, the hull split, and the tanker sank roughly 8 kilometers from shore. Nearby, Volganev 239 met a slower fate. It also broke apart, its forward section slipping beneath the surface, while the stern drifted helplessly before grounding near Cape Panagia. Within minutes, dark fuel began seeping into the water, spreading outward in heavy, slow-moving stains. Both ships were relics. More than 50 years old, they were designed for rivers and inland routes, not exposed maritime straits during winter storms. Their cargo, between 4,000 and 5,000 tons of M100 mazout, required constant heating to remain fluid. Once released into cold seawater, it thickened, clung, and sank, marking the beginning of a spill that would not behave like ordinary oil. As images emerged of fractured hulls and widening slicks, Russian authorities opened criminal investigations. The captains were detained. Questions followed quickly. Why were obsolete tankers operating here at all? Why were safety margins ignored? Behind those questions hovered a larger, darker context, the so-called shadow fleet. Poorly maintained vessels, lightly inspected, quietly moving sanctioned oil through contested waters. In the Kerch Strait that morning, the cost of that system surfaced, black and unmistakable, on the sea itself. The failure in the Kerch Strait did not arrive suddenly. It was built, layer by layer, long before the hulls split. On the night of 14 December, the weather turned unstable. Gusts climbed towards 60 kilometers an hour. Waves rose and fell without rhythm, striking the tankers at angles inland vessels were never designed to endure. These were not extraordinary conditions for the Black Sea in winter, but they were unforgiving ones. The ships themselves were already past their safe lifespan. More than 5 decades old, both Volganev tankers belonged to a class intended for rivers and sheltered waters. Their long frames and shallow drafts made them vulnerable in open seas, especially when loaded with dense, heated fuel. Age had weakened their structural margins, and time had eroded the assumptions of safety they once carried. Yet technical fragility alone does not explain why they were there. The war transformed the Black Sea into a regulatory gray zone. Inspections became irregular, oversight thinned, international cooperation collapsed. Risk quietly normalized as commerce continued under conflict conditions, shielded from scrutiny by urgency and secrecy. Russian maritime rules prohibit such vessels from operating in winter storms and high waves. Those limits were ignored. Whether by pressure, negligence, or necessity, the tankers sailed anyway. In that decision, the final condition was set. When weather, age, and war converged, the disaster became less an accident than an outcome waiting to surface. The spill did not explode outward. It unfolded slowly, heavily, almost deliberately. When the hulls failed on the 15th of December, mazout leaked into the Kerch Strait while still warm and briefly mobile, spreading in thick, uneven ribbons across the water. Within hours, the fuel began to cool. It darkened. It thickened. What remained on the surface no longer behaved like oil, but like something closer to liquid asphalt. Satellite images soon confirmed what could not be seen from shore. Long, opaque slicks stretched outward from the wreck sites, bending with wind and current. By the 18th of December, a continuous stain had reached the beaches near Anapa, more than 60 kilometers away. From above, it appeared as a scar across the water, unbroken, slow-moving, and expanding. In early January, the pattern repeated farther west. Oil was detected along the Crimean coastline, near Sevastopol and Cape Aya, By 3rd February, traces reached Odessa, having covered more than 600 kilometers from the origin point. The spill had crossed borders without pause or permission. Later observations suggested incursions into the Sea of Azov and the possibility of further spread toward Turkey, Bulgaria, and Romania. What made this disaster distinct was its persistence. Satellite radar and open-source intelligence revealed repeated slicks emerging from the same locations. Not one release, but many. From December through June, new traces appeared after storms or shifts in temperature. The wounds continued to bleed. Sunken fuel was being stirred, lifted, and redistributed. Oceanography explains the reach. The Black Sea main current and the rim current act like slow conveyor belts, capable of transporting floating and semi-submerged material across vast distances. Mazout, with its near-neutral buoyancy and brackish water, does not simply sink and disappear. It hovers, rolls, and migrates. Its physical properties worsen the damage. Dense and highly viscous, mazout forms tar balls and compacted lumps that resist breakdown. Once mixed with sand or seaweed, it settles into sediments, where oxygen is scarce and degradation is slow. Storms then disturb these deposits, releasing oil again. Secondary pollution, months or even years later. In the Kerch Strait, the spill never truly ended. It changed shape, it moved, and beneath the surface, it continues to wait. The official response arrives slowly, as if the scale of the damage resisted acknowledgement. For 9 days after the tankers broke apart, the spill spread without a unified federal command. Only then did Moscow declare a nationwide emergency. By that point, the oil had already reached open coastlines, settled into sediments, and slipped beyond easy containment. Attention first turned to what remained visible. The stranded stern of Volganev 239 was surrounded by floating booms, an attempt to draw a clean line around a growing stain. Engineers carved a trench around the wreck to stabilize the structure and limit further release. Dismantling followed, piece by piece, under difficult conditions. Yet the sections that sank beneath the surface were left where they fell. No containment domes, no full immobilization. Their removal was postponed until 2026, leaving the source of the spill partially active. Along the shoreline, the response became labor-intensive and relentless. Russian authorities report that roughly 475 kilometers of coast were cleaned. Bulldozers scraped beaches, workers filled bags with oil-soaked sand. By spring, more than 158,000 tons of contaminated material had been collected. Near Anapa, seabed cleanup operations continued into June, an acknowledgement that the damage was not limited to what could be seen from land. Much of the work fell to volunteers. Thousands arrived, often with minimal protective equipment, shoveling blackened sand by hand. The risks were immediate and physical. By January, at least 146 people had sought medical care after exposure. One teenage volunteer with asthma collapsed and died before emergency services could reach him. Even as new slicks appeared, the same beaches had to be cleaned again. Disposal created another problem. Some waste was incinerated. Other loads were sent to landfills, sparking protests from nearby communities. Records of where all contaminated material went remain incomplete. Internationally, monitoring assistance came through the International Charter on Space and Major Disasters, enabling satellite tracking. Yet wartime restrictions limited transparency and cooperation. Ukraine has estimated the long-term cleanup cost at up to $14 billion, a figure that reflects not only scale, but the price of delay. The true damage of the Kerch Strait spill did not announce itself all at once. It surfaced quietly in fragments, carried ashore by waves and wind. Along beaches once known for clarity and calm, birds began to appear first. Their feathers were darkened and stiff, their movements slow and uncoordinated. Russian officials reported that around 6,000 birds were collected and sent to rehabilitation centers. Fewer than 1 in 5 survived. What was recorded on land, however, represents only a fraction of the loss. Experts estimate that tens of thousands more likely died unseen, out at sea. Mazout is especially lethal to birds. It clings to feathers, destroying their insulating and waterproof properties. Unable to regulate body temperature, birds succumb to hypothermia even in mild conditions. As they attempt to clean themselves, they ingest the oil, introducing toxins into their organs. Rehabilitation is long, resource-intensive, and uncertain. Weeks of treatment are often followed by delayed organ failure. Survival rates remain low. Marine mammals followed. Along the coasts of Crimea and Russia's Krasnodar region, between 60 and 70 dead dolphins were recorded in the months after the spill. These animals rely on echolocation, breathing cycles, and sensitive skin. Oil in the water disrupts all three. Many deaths likely went uncounted, their bodies sinking or drifting beyond monitored shores. The geography of the impact deepens the concern. Crimea's southern coast, the Opuk Nature Reserve, and the Meganom Peninsula are ecologically rich zones, home to unique plant life and critical breeding sites. The timing could not have been worse. The spill coincided with the Black Sea-Mediterranean spring migration, when millions of birds passed through the region between February and April. Stopover sites became contamination zones. Beneath the surface, the damage is slower but more enduring. Heavy mazout settles into sediments, where oxygen is limited and breakdown is painfully slow. In these conditions, only specialized microorganisms can degrade hydrocarbons, a process that can take decades. Disturbance from storms or warming waters remobilizes the oil, releasing toxins again and again. Sampling of water and seabed sediments revealed hydrocarbon and polyaromatic hydrocarbon levels exceeding permissible limits by up to 7 times. Concentrations declined, then spiked again, mirroring seasonal temperature changes. This cycle suggests a long-term contamination pattern, not a single event. All of this unfolds in a sea already strained. Naval operations, wartime shipping, chronic pollution, and the ecological shock from the Kakhovka Dam collapse have pushed the Black Sea toward a threshold. The Kerch Strait spill did not create this vulnerability. It exposed it. Behind the environmental statistics stood people drawn into the disaster by necessity and proximity. Along the beaches of Anapa and the Crimean coast, thousands of volunteers arrived with shovels, gloves, and improvised protective gear. Many worked for hours in cold wind, breathing fumes from heavy fuel oil. The risks were immediate and poorly managed. By January, at least 146 volunteers had sought medical attention. One young student with chronic asthma collapsed during cleanup and died before emergency services could intervene. His death became a quiet symbol of how environmental crises extract human costs long after headlines fade. Communities were disrupted in subtler ways. Beaches closed. Fishing slowed or stopped entirely. Tourism-dependent towns faced uncertainty as oil continued to resurface after storms. Each return of blackened sand reinforced a sense that the crisis was not ending, only repeating. Wildlife rehabilitation placed additional strain on society. Cleaning oil-soaked birds is painstaking work, requiring weeks of care, specialized facilities, and trained staff. Despite these efforts, survival rates remained low, confronting volunteers and professionals alike with repeated loss. The emotional toll accumulated. In a region already shaped by war, the spill compounded psychological fatigue. Environmental disasters layered onto military tension created a sense of instability without relief. For many, the oil was not just pollution, it was another reminder that even the landscape had become vulnerable. In theory, the Black Sea is protected by international law. The 1992 Bucharest Convention obligates coastal states to prevent and respond to pollution, including oil spills. UNCLOS and MARPOL establish rules on ship safety, liability, and environmental protection. On paper, the framework is comprehensive. In practice, it is fragile. The Kerch Strait disaster exposed the limits of enforcement during conflict. Liability mechanisms rely on cooperation, transparency, and access. War removed all three. Data sharing between Russia and Ukraine ceased. Joint response planning became impossible. Foreign assistance was politically constrained, even when environmental damage crossed borders. Responsibility blurred further in the context of Russia's shadow fleet. These vessels operate at the margins of regulation, often with unclear ownership, outdated equipment, and minimal insurance coverage. In this environment, recovery slows and risk endures. The Kerch Strait disaster exposes the collision of war, obsolete ships, and environmental neglect. Heavy fuel oil still lingers beneath the waves, resurfacing without warning. Without accountability or reform, the Black Sea will not simply remember this spill, it will live with it. History doesn't repeat, it warns. What lesson do you see in this one?